during the COVID-19 outbreak. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jean Combat.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me here this evening. It's nice to be at a podium, but not too formal. If you can't hear me at the back, then please put your hand up and start waving, and I'll know to kind of try harder. So tonight I'm going to give not a formal science lecture or presentation, but I do have a few slides so I can say next slide. But I'm going to, spin it in a bit more of a person. This is obviously a charitable event with many local people, and I'm really pleased that I can do something that's a bit more local. Of course, I shot to prominence, I suppose, during the COVID pandemic, and one of the things about tonight is that the only reason we can meet like this is because of the success of our vaccination programme. So a lot of my story relates to how I ended up in the press conference at number 10 Downing Street, and I'll touch on that. I'll touch on some of my COVID experiences and what it's like to be in government. But as I said, it's not a straight science talk. There's a lot more I'm going to tell you about. I'm going to tell you about some of that journey too. So really we've lived in the last 2 and 3/4 years through a most extraordinary period in history in the shape of really an extremely vicious pandemic, the like of which, if you look at the data, has not been seen since 1918. Sadly, it's not quite over, but we are in a much safer place now than we were in 2020 or 2021. The UK Health Security Agency, as we speak, are still tracking several variants. There are no immediate or obvious worries, but it still could be a difficult winter ahead of us, with influenza also now rising very sharply. And I know that our lives have all been touched by this terrible disease, and it will take a little time before things return to normal. Before I go any further, I realise that some people are will be impacted by what has happened, and I'm really sorry that it's been so. My life has also been severely impacted in the last 2 or 3/4 years by circumstances completely beyond my control and completely in a way I could never have imagined, and not all for the better. But it has been a privilege to serve this country of ours during such a difficult time, and I don't actually regret having had to do that for 1 second. Let me tell you first of all about how it all began. When all is said and done, I'm a simple Boston boy. I was born at the Boston General Hospital near the Dock in 1964 to mixed-race parents. My mother was from Wiverton, and my father was from the Mekong Delta in South Vietnam. And at the time, being a family of non-white ethnicity in Boston was almost unheard of. And it was not an affluent upbringing, but I have very, very fond memories of life in Lincolnshire. Now, first family home was in Fishloft, and I went to Hawthorne Tree Primary School and then to Boston Grammar School. But it wasn't always easy for my mum and dad. They had to have a special talk from the vicar before they got married about the consequences of marrying a foreigner and the perils of having mixed-race children. That was Boston, that was Lincolnshire in the 1960s. But for me, once I came into the world, they were very happy times that I shall never forget. My first job in government was not, in fact, Deputy Chief Medical Officer, but it was working on the land, cutting cauliflowers and picking potatoes at the Ministry of Agriculture Experimental Station on Willington Road in Curtin. And I used to bike there every day from Bishop to Curtin, 7 miles each way, rain or shine, didn't seem to matter at that age. And from 9 until 3:30 I was an assistant scientific officer. But from 6:30 until 9, before work began, I was a farmhand. And again, 4 till 6 in the evening, and that they were the best times. And that kind of experience, that kind of upbringing, has made me someone who is exceptionally proud to feel absolutely ordinary and absolutely normal and run-of-the-mill. And I cling on to that, and I've clung on to it throughout those last difficult 2.5 years. And I hope it stays that way. And I think that's why I find it easy to connect to everyday things and everyday people. But the contrast to that ordinary upbringing was that at some time in my childhood, and I really can't tell you when that was, I was told about my paternal grandfather. I was told that he'd been the Prime Minister of South Vietnam in 1952, and that is absolutely true. It didn't mean a great deal to me at the time. To be clear, I was no more proud of him than I am with my maternal grandfather, who was a warrant officer in the King's Shropshire Light Infantry. But that's what I was told. And I often thought about my paternal granddad and what it meant. But it started something running in my head about leadership and about purpose. And I later learned that my dad had served as a French paratroop officer in Algiers during a very dangerous and difficult time in that campaign. And that again set something going in my head about purpose and duty. And the other thing that happened, which is a remarkable thing that I'll share with you, was that my dad one day handed me a book. He said, "Read this." And it was an autobiography, semi-autobiography by a Japanese fighter pilot called Saburo Sakai. The book's called Samurai. I think people still write it. And it's his catalogue of his training in the Japanese Air Force pre-Second World War and his experiences during the Second World War. And he was a fighter ace. He shot down many, many planes and very celebrated. But he also told this story about, about the defeat, ultimate defeat. He told this story about hardship and duty and doing exactly what destiny called him to do, about accepting that job kind of unflinchingly and without any complaint. And I think I was left with that kind of sense of purpose and destiny, that if your time comes and you have to do something and it's your job to do it, then you must simply just get on and do it. And then the years roll by, you end up in medical school, and for those of you who've got kind of kids struggling with A-levels or anything like that, the requirements for Nottingham at the time when I got in were 3 Bs. Now I think it's 4 As or something. It was 3 Bs at the time. And I got an A in biology, A in physics, a D in chemistry, and a E in mathematics. So I barely got in. There was a discussion at home about going back to school for another year, to which I replied, "No, I'm not going in the army." To which my father replied, "No, you're not going back to school for another year." And to which I replied, "No, I'm going in the army." And then the phone rang, and Nottingham said, we have a single place left for a nearness offer. Do you want it?" And I didn't say anything because my dad had the phone, but yes, he does. But you finish and you get out of medical school. And by then I decided I wanted to be an epidemiological researcher. I enjoyed medicine, but I knew I liked kind of dealing with these patterns of diseases in populations. And my professor at the time gave me some great advice. He said, "Do you actually like being a doctor?" And I said, "Yes, I do actually." And he said, "Right, go away. Don't want to see you for 5 or 6 years. Go and get proper doctorate out of your system, and then come back and we'll talk about this epidemiology business." And that's what I did. But while I was away doing this proper doctorate, I met another professor in Leicester who was an expert in influenza himself, Carl Nicholson. And he made me do some research on respiratory viruses. And that literally stuck with me for the rest of my career. It's taken me to Public Health Laboratory Service, to the Health Protection Agency, to Public Health England, to the World Health Organization, to the pharmaceutical industry, and of course back to the university. And I did my public health training. And one of the people I met as a registrar was the then Chief Medical Officer, Ken Calman. And you probably know Susan Calman from TV, from her travel programme, but I knew Ken. And I said at this time, I want a job. I didn't really want this job, I wanted to be deputy there. And so I went off to the pharmaceutical industry, and you learn a lot about person management that you can't learn in the public sector, which was really fascinating. And you learn a lot about vaccines and how they work, how they're manufactured, and what it means to take an experimental concept to something that actually you can give very quickly to millions of people. And that was another lesson that came back to me, as you will know, much later in life. But in all of those jobs, I was never really anywhere near the best. But I was able to translate. I was able to talk to different languages and different tribes and get them to speak to each other and kind of understand each other's worldviews without really being an expert in anything. But that was, I guess, quite a conventional career in lots of ways. And the other thing I did was I cut my coupon out for the Territorial Army, aged 23. I cut it out within a day of qualifying in medicine. And I was posted to Liberty Trial Cadet Force. I stayed there 12 years. I left in 2000. I spent the next 22 years regretting having left and missing that sense of friendship and camaraderie and purpose that I believe you can't find anywhere else except in Her Majesty's Armed Forces. So it's really wonderful to have been recently appointed as one of the honorary colonels and to kind of get back into doing stuff. The mess kit is mysteriously shrunk in the washing. But the military teaches you that an order is an order, and if you're sent to go and do something, you don't ask why, you just get on and do it. And if it's hard, and it's your job to do it anyway, it won't help you one bit if your chin goes down and you decide you're going to be miserable about it. And you still have to do it. And so one of the things that helped me through those kind of pandemic moments was this thought that, well, you know, any fool can be miserable. I'm in this, I've got to do it, so I might as well not make a misery out of it and try and enjoy it a little, enjoy what is the matter. And you know, some things in life, the only way out of them is through them, you can't go around them. And this was one of those moments for me. And when it's hard, I find it best to cut the job up into small chunks and deal with bits you can deal with. And again, it's a kind of, a military thing. You put one foot in front of the other. You concentrate on basics such as water, food, shelter, warmth and friendship. And that way you can get through really difficult days. And so finally, in 2017, that kind of Ken Calman moment came true when the Deputy Chief Medical Officer job was advertised. I was very much an outside candidate. And the selection process was difficult, and there were a lot of very aggressive media tests. But I got the job, and I found I was a stranger in Whitehall, and even more a stranger in Westminster. And soon into that job, we of course had the Novichok attacks in Salisbury. And that really told me, look, in this job, anything could happen. And I think it was with that that came to late December 2019. I'd just renewed my contract for another 3 years. I could have walked away 2 months earlier. And as we kind of got the news of what was happening in China and small goods and drugs, my thoughts were, this is definitely big. it is definitely coming our way, and we're all going to have to stand up and count it. And now I will, if I may, just flip into a little bit of science, and it might be very difficult on the back. I do apologise. I didn't know the layout before we started our trial. Show you a little bit of the epidemiology. So, if I've got a laser pointer, I don't know what happens. If I show you this laser pointer, on this kind of block of epidemiology, which is Nottinghamshire in autumn 2020, every vertical slice from the left to the right is a death. And every age band is going up in age to the top of the slide. So you've got the 50s here, 18 to 29s, 30 to 44s, 45 to 59s, and 60 plus. And what you can see if you start on the left is that the first group that kind of heats up in terms of infections is this 16 to 29 year age group. And they heat up incredibly fast, just within a few days. And we know this because if you have 16 to 29 year olds, you know they have very, very high social contact rates. Also, you'll note on the slide that not much happens in the 0 to 50s. And if you own 16 to 29 year olds, you know they don't talk to their younger siblings very much. They do talk to their slightly older siblings. And you can see this age band heating up next, followed by this one, and followed by the oldest age group. And that essentially was the problem we were facing. And it was a problem because if you look at the blue line, which is lethality for seasonal flu, and we start again with the 20s on the left and the 80s on the right, you can see that once you get to the age of 30, the lethality of COVID in March 2020 was 4 times that of flu. And when you get to my kind of age, it's getting to almost 20 times that of flu. And that was the problem that we were facing. That we had something coming at us that was very rapid, had a very high mortality rate in the early 50s, a strong hospital higher than normal severity in anyone over the age of 30, no vaccines, no therapeutics, and frankly, no idea when they would come. So, at that point, very early on, I knew we needed a vaccine. And I knew it was a race against time. And I can't remember who started the conversation, whether it was me or whether it was Sir Patrick Vallance, but it was definitely a mobile phone call between us. And one of us said to the other, we need vaccines and we need a vaccine task force. And the other one replied, we need vaccines and we need a vaccine task force, and we better get on with this pretty fast. And the vaccine task force was formed in April 2020. By that stage, when it formed, I'd already spoken to Pfizer, and I already knew about the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and we were kind of on our way. And the vaccine task force was an absolutely remarkable beast. But firstly, and you'll be interested in this as a kind of business audience, it was absolutely no accident that Dame Kate Bingham, who's a veterinarianist, not a scientist, not a doctor. Dame Kate Bingham was in charge of the vaccine task force. And instead of a typical kind of scientific makeup, we had manufacturing experts, we had commercial people, we had people from the private sector, we had a few civil servants thrown in there for kind of great variety. But we had lots of other quite unique individuals, and I was really privileged to be the medical advisor. And we literally decided that we had to spread bet to fulfil the Prime Minister's orders, which were to get a vaccine for the UK and therefore for the world as fast as possible. So we had to back multiple horses in the same race. And of course, as you know, if you kind of bet on a horse and win, the ones that don't win, you're going to lose money if you bet on them as well. But we knew we got to do that, and we knew we had to spend very large amounts of taxpayers' money, your money, at risk in order to get one winner. In actual fact now, those 4 vaccines that are in bold on this slide, all of them have delivered a licensed product. We've only used 2 of them in the UK, but actually all 4 have delivered somewhere around the world. And we moved at speed, and there was no longer this, you're the manufacturer, we'll buy it if we like it kind of approach. It was, you're the manufacturer, we will help you make it. If you need premises, if you need staff, whatever you need, including money, we will help you make it, because it's so important to us that somebody succeeds. And that's how it was. But I can say to you, with the messenger RNA vaccines, if this pandemic had happened 5 years before it did, they would not have been ready. And this would not have been possible. So there's no good fortune, is there, whatsoever in the pandemic. But that was a piece of good fortune that the R&D had brought the messenger RNA to the point where we could use it. And so we've got vaccines, and one of the wonderful things about this country is that the politicians kept out of the vaccine decision making. They said to JC9, you decide who gets it first and why, and we will just do as you say. And the very, very simple, the very, very simple explanation lies in this right-hand column, which I know you can't see at the back. But basically, it's the number of patients needed to vaccinate to save 1 COVID death. And in the care homes, we're talking about just 20 vaccines to save 1 death. In the 80 plus, 160. Then it goes 350, 600, 1,000. And by the time you get to the bottom of the slide, under the everyone else category, it's 47,000. And that is why this country went very rigidly and very strictly down A Georgia and nothing else, because it was quick, easy, and it was epidemiologically correct. And another thing that happened was that we decided that we would allow 12 weeks between the first and the second dose, when the label on the product said give the second dose at 4 weeks. And it was very controversial, and there was a lot of opposition to it from many reputable medical groups. But we stuck to our guns, and if you look at these red dots, and I think you probably can see these red dots on the right of the slide on the back, the lower the red dot, the greater the protection the vaccine is giving. And on the left, the interval between first and second dose is just 3 days. On the right, where the dots are lowest, the interval between first and second dose is 81 days maximum. There's no sign that that curve is kind of bottoming out. And so, if we were having a pandemic next year, and we have a vaccine now, I would want each of you to have at least 3 months of, if we could manage it, 6 months between doses. So it was the right thing to do. And this slide is going to sum up the vaccine programme in just a few seconds. Now, for those of you who are again right at the back, up here on the top left there's a date, and it's set at December 2020. And as the movie runs, that date will change very, very rapidly until we get to December 2021. So it's a year's worth of data. And the blue lines that you can see are the levels of antibody against COVID in the UK population. The youngsters on the left, the very elderly on the right. And you can just see what happens over a very short space of time. So the graph stops in September 2021. And for those of you who are not yet asleep with me droning on about this, you'll have noticed that in the extreme elderly, those levels were just starting to drop at the end. And that is why we did the booster programme, which brought everybody right back up by Christmas. So that was the kind of serological, immunological science behind the vaccine programme. And that's just in case that slide there. What you see on this slide is the result. And again, by age, from the under 18s over here, through to the 80s and over on the right, you can see the contrast in the hospitalisation rates to COVID between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. They're absolutely stark and a testimony to what science and the NHS managed to achieve. And with all that, one of the things we've done is we've taken something which is well known in public health circles called the iceberg disease. And as you can see on the left, pre-vaccine, it was quite big, and there was quite a lot sticking above the waterline. That's the people, the fatal cases and people hospitalised. And unlike the Royal Navy, in public health, we worry about the bit of the iceberg that's sticking out of the water. And what we did was we made this iceberg a little bit smaller, but not that much smaller, because in fact we don't prevent infection very well, as you well know. But they have made a very small amount of severe disease poke through, and that is the difference. So, let me now continue. I tell you what I thought about doing media for the first time. I'm not going to mention the journalists involved, but there was clearly a kind of bit of mischief there, and a bit of wanting to kind of make a story out of me, this new kid on the block. And so I let him come closer. I let him keep on asking his question, and until he was fully articulate. Yeah, I've got you. And so I drawn him into the kill zone. And then I fired. And I said, what are you talking about? Completely the wrong test. And there was a deadly silence. That was my first brush with the media during the pandemic. Then after that, it got easier. And in case you're kind of wondering, the anatomy of a typical number 10 presser often began the day before, when number 10 would ring my office and say, we're going to do a press conference tomorrow at 5, we want Van Town for this. And my office would always, without even contacting me, go, no, he doesn't want to do it tomorrow, or no, he's not available tomorrow. That's the kind of ritual, you go back with a no, sorry, can't. And then it comes back with, well, it's this minister, and they ask for Van Town by name. And then my private secretary would ring me and say, well, he's actually asked for you by name now, what shall we do? And saying, no, tell them I'm too busy. And then phone the ring again. They're insistent it has to be you. And you know your name's on the bullet. And so you kind of give in. And the moment you've given in and you know it's happening, and that's usually the night before, but it could be in the morning, then this whole team around you in the CIO's office spring into action. Get me a briefing on this, get me 2 lines on that, get me 10 sentences on this. Do this, do that. And a whole load of briefings kind of pile into your inbox for you to read. You can't learn them, it's not possible. But you can kind of read them and hope something sticks, so that if you get a question, you can answer it. And then it's usually down on the train in the kind of early afternoon, ready to get down to number 10. And on that train journey, I would always have a conversation with our principal private secretary, who's got a very strong background in the media, and he would kind of pump me up on difficult questions. But you never get to know which questions are coming beforehand. It's very gladiatorial. You sometimes know which journalists are going to be there, and you can semi-predict from the journalist what the question will be, but you never know the questions. And so you kind of work through all of that on the train, and then you get down to number 10. And at number 10, my ritual is always to find Larry, if he's around, and to do a little bit of birthday, very calm. And they make a very nice cup of tea in the tea, certainly Polish on it. And I always used to go and have a cup of tea at 4 o'clock. Got there quite early, and the minister would usually join around 4:30, ready for the press conference at 5. And there'd be lots of kind of warm-up questions. And then suddenly the comms people would say, 5 minutes now, you need to get your line up in the corridor and ready to go on. And so you line up in the corridor in your order, and you have to remember all the manners and remember with social distancing, make sure that was absolutely spot on. Because the moment you walk through those doors, the cameras are on you, get all of that right, and then they would say, right, 5 o'clock, go. And you start walking, and then next one, go. And you go in and do the press conference. And after that, when you come back out, you kind of breathe a sigh of relief, have a coffee. And what I then do, because I'm not on social media, I check my phone to see what my sister has posted. About what's going on Twitter, whether it went down well or not, and so forth. And so she's my kind of monitor, as it were. And you get to know the Boston United training or not. I guess I'd like to tell you about the Barnard Castle moment. I knew that the question was going to come, and I was determined I was going to answer it my way, not the political way, but my way. And I had planned my answer, ready to say that I believe the rules apply to everybody. And I think I was trying to make a point about that if you're in a position of leadership and you have to do something, and if everyone has to do it, you absolutely must. So that's how I came to be benched for 3 weeks. And I got a text from one of my private secretaries after that little encounter, as I was walking back to our offices, and he said, well, that's it, mate, you're on the bench. But then, of course, it became routine. And in the end, I was a kind of special deployment person for vaccine communications, and I think for some reasons. But there we are. And then, for me, it just came to an end. The vaccine programme had done what it needed to do. I felt I was running out of steam. I felt I'd done the hard yards, and it was now time to pass on the baton. And that is how and when I decided that enough was enough, and it was time to return to normal life. And thank you all very much for having me here this evening, and I hope that was interesting.